especially excited to be here with two of my favorite people, talking about some very important issues facing our city, our region, and our country. Just one housekeeping announcement, and that is there are likely some index cards circulating through the room. If you have, as you're listening to today's conversation, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, take some time to write that down, and we will incorporate your questions into our conversation. There'll also be some time for a question and answer period towards the end of our conversation. We're going to get right into the conversation, and I'm going to start with you, Monika. You lead the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and by way of introduction, could you tell us about why you do this work, and then also tell us about what your organization does, and share a success story.
All right, that's a lot in one question. Why I do this work? I have only known this work. I started my career as a human rights attorney. Spent most of my career doing international human rights work, sort of with this idea, very similar to our theme tonight, fighting, building, and healing, of fighting every major injustice I could find. I was in Rwanda as a law clerk, went on to work in Haiti on the right to health and a number of other issues. But it was this sort of sense of fighting. And at some point I kind of burnt out and was overwhelmed and left this work, and then the election happened, and Charlottesville happened, and I have 3 young kids, and so I came back to this work, and why I do it today is to build something different, to create the world I want to raise my kids in. And in terms of the Lawyers Committee, which I'm very excited to be at, we are one of the oldest civil rights organizations in the country, or on this side of the country. We were formed over 50 years ago to be a bridge between the private attorneys and the civil rights movement, to have attorneys volunteer their time to support the civil rights movement. Our work focuses on 3 areas: immigrant justice, racial justice, and economic justice. We are unique in that we are really, maybe not unique, but from our inception, perhaps at that time we were unique in that our work is really community focused and driven. The issues that we work in are because individual clients come into our doors. We operate a clinic at Glide, and there are many different ways that folks come in, and we partner with community-based organizations to understand the systems of oppression and discrimination that we want to change. So we do individual representation, and then we use impact and impact litigation, legislative advocacy to dismantle or transform the system of oppression. And there's something I can share. In terms of a success story, we've had a pretty good couple of weeks. I will share a little bit later some of our immigration work, but I think one of the things that we have worked on for a long time is fines and fees, or the ways in which wealth is extracted out of communities of color. And years ago, we started working on driver's license suspensions, folks who lost their driver's licenses for failure to pay parking violations. Representing folks that were coming in through Glide, we figured out how to end that in California, and now other states around the country are doing that. We're now moving on to towing people who lose their vehicles for basically poverty-related tows, and we're also looking at municipal infractions. So every way that wealth is extracted, we're trying to end that.
Thank you. Mano, you're up. Tell us, you're the new public defender for the city of San Francisco. Similar to the question that I just asked Monika, tell us a bit about why you do this work, and then for those of us who are curious in the audience, what does the public defender do, and what vision are you bringing to that office?
So what my vision of what the Hello? Okay. So my vision of what the public defender's office should do, and it may differ from other public defender's offices. Our job is not to provide competent representation, because some lawyers in the room may have heard of that phrase, adequate assistance of counsel or competent representation. But the purpose of that standard is to make sure that if there's a conviction, it is upheld on appeal. What we're trying to do is to provide high-level representation. And if I had to describe that succinctly, it would be if a loved one or a family member of yours were charged with a crime, what kind of representation would you want for that? And that's the level we should be providing. And if we're not, we need to raise that level. And I think that's something we try to encourage at all stages of the process in our office. We also fight to keep families together, avoid unjust deportations, and provide accountability, government accountability, police accountability, and try and ensure that happens so that if there is a plea or a conviction, it's something that has integrity as opposed to a conviction without integrity. We're also very committed to juvenile justice work and, very importantly, racial justice work. We started a Pan Bay area organization called Public Defenders for Racial Justice after the Michael Brown and some of the other shootings, in part based on all the momentum started by the Black Lives Matters movement to try to be much more race conscious in courtrooms. As far as myself in this work, I think a lot of it comes from my family. My family's from a village in South India that experienced dynamics around caste, poverty, water shortages, and for me it was very easy to see the colonial connection between that and racial injustice as it manifested in the criminal injustice system or the punishment system in this country. So to me, it was a logical step. And as far as the actual work of being a public defender's office, you have to actually do it to know that you want to do it. So I worked for a critical race theorist when I was an undergraduate at Columbia to look at how the law, which claims to be free of bias in so many areas, is not. And when I was at Berkeley Law School, I got my first taste. I'd done some work in housing and immigration, but my first taste for actually doing trial work in a public defender's office, and it just felt very natural and right to me. And every time I did more of it, I got more internal and external validation of that. And it's just been one thing after another. As far as San Francisco, I initially started in Contra Costa County. One thing that drew me to San Francisco was that Jeff Adachi really had a model that he wanted the public defender's office to be a community law office too. We have our Mo Magic or Be Magic programs, which are 501c3 organizations running in conjunction with the PD's office. So we're really trying to work ourselves out of a job at the same time that we believe in vigorous defense for our clients. So it was a natural fit for me to come to the office. And then Jeff asked me after a few years to become the director of training, and then I was managing the felony unit. And then after Jeff's tragic passing, the mayor appointed me, and then the election happened. So here we are.
And then we elected you.
Monika, you mentioned the theme for this evening in your opening statements. Could you say more about the framing for this evening, fighting, healing, building, and what that means to you and what you think that means for our community?
Yeah, thank you. So there are a few folks from my office here. I'm like a broken record since I got here, which is that we are living in a very difficult time, and there's a lot being thrown at us from this administration. Every day I'm looking at our immigration attorney, there is a new immigration horrifying law passed almost every week or policy. So we are like just drinking out of a fire hose, and so we're gonna fight. But what this is an opportunity right now to look at all of the racism and discrimination, all the things that have been broken in our country that have really risen to the surface. And so we're gonna take the opportunity to also build a different community. And so Mano and I and my husband were out one night, and we were talking about this fighting and building, and Mano said, well, what about the healing? I was like, well, I talk about it all the time, it's so critical. And so in this moment, if we are going to fight, we're going to fight what's coming at us. We're going to use the opportunity to create a new space. In order to actually envision and paint the picture of where we're going, we're going to have to heal along the way. Heal in communities that have been oppressed and just beaten down from the beginning of this country and over time. And within our own institutions, the healing that's required for all of us who do this work as to make it through the day sometimes, and then to have the creative space to say, what would the world look like if we didn't have a punishment system like we have today? So that's where this came. And so my hope for tonight is not that we're gonna paint the vision, because really we shouldn't be leading that, but that we open the thinking and the space within our communities to have conversation around vision and what we're moving towards.
Well, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So the general correct perception of our office is that we're an office of fighters, and I want us to certainly maintain that. We want an aggressive public defender's office that's really willing to push the envelope and fight for our clients as if they were loved ones, and hopefully we actually are developing that connection with our clients. But I remember my first supervisor in Contra Costa County where I started, and he said, you know, someone should really do a study on the impact that it has on a client if going to trial versus this notion of early acceptance of responsibility and just pleading guilty. For the following reason. There's this notion, oh, you pled guilty and therefore you've accepted responsibility. But the mere fact of someone being next to you and fighting for you and caring for you, you know, for hours in court, because a lot of times when you're appearing in court, it's a quick appearance, it's being put over. But when you're in trial, then you have someone fighting next to you for, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And the mere fact of someone fighting for you, that validation that I see you being seen, or that moment of love between, or connection between that attorney team and the client, can that be a springboard going forward, regardless of the result, and really empowers that individual to move in a more positive direction, regardless of the outcome. And I think that's really profound. I think that can have a real healing impact on people and their families. And I think that's something that I want to really, you know, encourage us to realize. We have to brand ourselves differently than just people who are sort of throwing, which we want to be someone who's, you know, throwing wrenches in the train towards conviction, or towards the prison or jail pipeline. But at the same time, we're healing as we're fighting. And I think that's an important concept for us to be aware of.
A little bit earlier, just in passing, you referred to the punishment system, you know, the advertisement that went out to the public talked about the criminal justice system. Tell us a little bit about why you're saying punishment system, not criminal justice system. What should we be learning in your change of language there?
Well, let me draw on some wisdom that I got from my 9-year-old son, because I was talking with him about this yesterday, what we're going to talk about today. And he said in their school they have this, you know, if someone's bullying you or you're having some issues on the playground, they have a stop, walk, and talk system. And what they told him is that means tell the person to stop, they're bothering you, walk away, and if they continue bothering you, tell the teacher. And I said, okay, well, and then what does the teacher do? The teacher will hopefully talk to you and work it out. He said, yeah. He said, they're not just gonna, you know, throw the person in the cage. He said, why would they throw you in the cage? He started laughing. And I said, well, that's actually the system we have here. It's our first instinct when there's been a harm, even if it's a property harm, is put one of the individuals in the cage. And that's the instinct, and it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, the restorative justice model is to look at the situation and say, if there's been a harm, to identify the impacted person, and then also identify the alleged perpetrator, then see how can we bring that person who was harmed to more wholeness and bring the community to more wholeness. Seems like a more logical system, so can we work on systems like that? Now, having said that, we know that the number of times in court when the district attorney files something, it's very often completely mischarged or overcharged. So it's important that we have attorneys ready to bring justice in the courtroom and fight as hard to get the just result. But having said that, the starting point should not, I don't think has to be, even though we condition that way, that one person has to be caged. That's why I refer to it that way. It's sort of become an instinctive reaction, but it doesn't have to be. There are other systems that we can have that are more socially just.
Sticking on the